All right, thank you for joining us. Now, in many countries, there are still issues of female genital mutilation, where there is a partial or total removal of the external female genitalia for non-medical reasons. According to the World Health Organization, this practice is internationally recognized as a violation of the human rights of girls and women. But there are still situations where some health personnel, like doctors, nurses, have been seen to condone it. This has caused concerns among persons and thus begs the question as to why there is still some medical justification for it. In the studio with me is consultant gynecologist and obstetrician Dr. Modupe Adedeji. Good morning.
Good morning.
And joining us via Zoom is Executive Secretary of the Oyo State Primary Healthcare Board, Dr. Muhyiddin Olatunji. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes, let me begin with you, Dr. Olatunji. The issue about female genital mutilation has raised concerns, and now we're beginning to see a dimension where it is being medicalized. I wonder what concerns you have with this.
Thank you. Like you already pointed out, if anybody that's seriously connected with the whole process will be very concerned, because we are trying to reverse the trend of the practice of female genital mutilation, and we are trying to get across to the communities, to the mothers, most of the gatekeepers in our nooks and crannies, to talk to them, to dissuade them from going on with this practice. Now, to now come through the back door via orthodox means something unthinkable, and it's not pardonable. So we are trying to now refocus attention on this group of experts to be able to convince them and let them see the reason why there's no need to medicalize female genital mutilation. Mutilation is mutilation in all I'm sure you can ever look at it, and it's something that needs to be discouraged. So we cannot say because I'm a medical personnel, I can do it under a sterile or a genital condition. No, nobody's asking to do that one. Don't deform and don't cut, don't mutilate. Just leave the women folks the way they are. And if we can now dissuade the traditional to stop doing it, why should we now, in the orthodox environment, continue to do such a practice? So it gives all of us a great concern, and we're trying to work against it.
Still staying with you, Dr. Olatunji, how are you trying to ensure that medical practitioners stop this? What are the measures in specific terms?
Good. What you need to do, at least one thing you need to do once you identify a challenge or a problem, you want to know the source, the root cause of the problem, and you know the category of medical personnel that are involved. So you start by enlightenment drive. You try to educate them, organize workshop, seminar, and bring them to speed on what to do and what not to do. Then what is the position of law as far as female genital mutilation is, and the danger inherent in it, and the reason why they should not medicalize it. So when you give this information, definitely a lot are going to change. Many people, sorry to say this, they might be doing it ignorantly. They don't even mean any harm. They thought you are even trying to help the female gender by taking away from the traditional circumciser and now be the one to do it. So, but why not provide them with the right information, and they tend to change that way. So what we need to do more is interfacing with the group of medical practitioners that are involved, and you increase the number of seminar workshops that you engage in doing, and you give them some of the information, education, and communication material so that they will be well informed. So once you provide the information and education, I'm very sure they will change.
All right, let's bring the conversation to the studio, Dr. Adedeji. Some have said that perhaps medicalizing it is because they feel that changing of the environment, handling it by a medical personnel will ensure that the harm, that there wouldn't be as much harm on the gender, that's the female who is going through this process, as much as it is when it is being done locally.
Yes, well, I think that view is on the focus of the early complications that it can cause. For instance, infection, patients, females bleeding from the procedure, and the procedure, they can bleed so much that can result into shock. Then talk about the infections and abscesses that can follow through. On that thought, fine. But nevertheless, what is happening is that you are mutilating the external genitalia of a female. That our Lord has constructed it naturally in a normal way. At the end of the day, when you look at the late complications that it causes, you know that yes, you are trying to remove infection, trying to say sterility, trying to say proper instrument, trying to say that the environment you are doing it is clean and all that. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, the late complications are there, which starts with even the mental effects.
Psychological effect.
Yes, on the woman itself. At the end of the day, there's problem with sex, especially when you get married. There are different types of this mutilation, from type 1 to the mutilation can be as bad as closing up, and they have a lot of myths as regards doing it. And you know, at the end of the day, by the time the woman tends to know themselves, because sometimes they even do it on neonates, they do it on adolescents that may not understand what is going on. But by the time you now know what you are into, as in getting married, you are not having a good sexual satisfaction and all of that, then you know that yes, you were trying to prevent early complications, but you have brought about late ones that will even be prolonged and that the female child can live with. Is still a right. So
there's no justification for it at all, medicalizing or not.
At all.
Now let's talk. You mentioned something that I want you to expatiate on, talking about the impact of carrying this out. We know the myth surrounding it, okay, so that the lady will not prostitute, so that the child will not, so many things.
Yes.
But let's look at the complications surrounding, you know, mutilating the female child.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
Yes, if you understand what they do, or you've seen it be done before, the list of it is just nicking, as in the licking on the clitoris. And that is just evidence by you keep nicking until you bleed, which seems as the simplest of all. But now the other ones are the one cutting off the clitoris, cutting off the folds beside the clitoris and vagina. That's what we call the labia minora and majora. And not even cutting off only, putting it together, that it will heal. It will now heal up, and then it's as if the place is closed. The worst of it is it is totally closed, and then a hole is given for which will be given later. I even found out that they would tend to measure the penile shaft of the so-called spouse to know the exact size that will be put there. And at the end of the day, when the woman now gets pregnant, then how do you want to take that delivery?
Yeah.
That means that you have to break it open for the baby to come out. That is bleeding. Most times they end up with cesarean section that is not necessary and all of that. So it's really, really, when you think about it, from the beginning, the life of the female up till the reproductive age, and even much after, it's really, really bad. It's actually a right, where it's actually going against the woman's rights. That's justice.
That's where a lot of persons, you know, have positioned this conversation with regards to medicalizing this issue. That where does the right of the female come when you talk about saying, okay, because we want to ensure, okay, it is safe, it is clean, that is why we are medicalizing it. But let's go back to Dr. Adedeji. Now, you said that the issue about ensuring, educating the people in terms of the medical practitioners who are engaging in these things, that some of them perhaps are ignorant. But is that in itself enough to deter persons who still carry out this practice? Because some of them are perhaps making monies at the side, and so some would say that that in itself is not enough.
Well, thank you. You take a 1,000-mile journey with a footstep, and to be able to punish any person for anything, you must be able to provide the right information. And the main goal is not to punish or to destroy any person, unless those that are so recalcitrant. That is why the education aspect is very cogent, and you create more awareness. And if you go deep, the prevalence among the professional circumciser in our state initially was about 6.1, but today it has gone down to as low as 3.3. And we have not been able to imprison any person. What we do mostly is to go into them, educate them, let them see the danger inherent in this, and let's see what we can demotivate them from doing it. Show them like Shirley pointed out, show them most of the complications, and we'll let the mothers, the women folk, let them take the lead in the propagation of this gospel. Now, we can see that it's yielding. Now, for those medical practitioners now, so we want to go that route initially. Now, if some now become recalcitrant, they are not yielding, there's a provision for the law, because there is a law passed now, which is violence against women, the gender-based violence law. And there are provisions that deals with issue of the female genital mutilations there. So if you run foul of the law, then you can be prosecuted and you can even go to jail for doing such a thing. But that is not the main thing we want to start first now. Until we start seeing people that are recalcitrant, that are unyielding, they value their own comfort and the work more than the future and the life of the female folks, then they can be dealt with us as well. Like I told you, it's a two-pronged approach. First of all, dissuade first, use the carrot and stick. So if they don't take the carrot, then you can bring out the stick and then whip them back to line.
Right. Still staying with you, you talked about the fact that the state has been able to reduce the number of traditional circumcisers to 33.3%, and that it's looking to see that mothers take the lead to educating their children, or pushing to ensure that this practice is brought to perhaps a minimal stage in the state. But then again, you know what tradition is, how it is deeply rooted in the people, how this is passed from one generation to the other, and how it is that we are in a patriarchal society. I mean, when you look at a lot of these factors, how much can mothers do to bring about the change that you're talking about?
Thank you. Mothers can do a lot. I agree with you, in a patriarchal society that men takes lead. And most of these circumcisers as well, they are men. And we bring them to, we are not, I just give an example of giving them the power of education to be able to take some decision on their own. We did not close up against the men folk, because they are actually the one that practice mostly. They are the Olola, they are the people that circumcise the female folks we're talking about. So we engage them as well. And like I said, tradition is something that's deeply rooted in us. To disengage or to disconnect from it is only very, very difficult. Let me tell you, it's not a matter of tea party to get to where we got to now. It's not that easy. Most of them will tell you, you want to take us away from our own means of livelihood, and they are most of the time coming to fight in a very violent way. They are so aggressive. But because of what you know you want to do, you pursue it. You let them see the inherent danger. You show them example. And you can whip up sentiment, emotions in women when they see a woman that is circumcised and now go into labor and die as a result of childbirth, or go into a serious complication, die from severe hemorrhage at birth. And you see the kind of agony, the pain they're going to, women that cannot even stay in their husband's house because why? They could not give the man the desired sexual satisfaction, and they have to move from one house to the other, and they have a broken home. So there are a lot of complications, like the gynecologist mentioned. There are immediate, which is short term, and then the long time complications that can actually come from them. So we brought on board the men folk as well as we bring the women folk. But you know, women has a great impact on any one of us. If you let them form themselves into a very strong force, and they help you to advocate, they can go to the palace and demand from the king, this is what we want. And we actually tried that one out. The market leaders were charged to help us be in the vanguard of the campaign. And they went from house to house and changed the mindset of every person. And you will think we are in a patriarchal society, but you should agree with me from anecdotal evidence. The women have a very strong influence even on the men folk themselves. If they want to get something done, there's a way they can manipulate you to get it done. And especially in this environment that we are in now, mother-in-laws have a very, very great role to play in the life of their children and their children's children. They will come and tell you, this is the way I nurtured you, this is what we did. They are the one that won't take the child to the circumciser, not with the father. So if the mother that's supposed to take it down there does not do it, it's hard for men to do it, and can convince the men to do it. And this thing affects women mostly. So that's why we place so much emphasis on them without closing our eyes against the men folks as well.
All right. I wonder if Dr. Adedeji thinks otherwise, or you know, agree with him with regards to women taking the lead in this matter to address this issue, still bearing in mind that some men would say that I am the head of this home. I determine what happens, what I want for my children.
Yes, more or less, this is actually a social problem when you look at it very well. It's actually a dilemma because, as you mentioned, there are many things to it. There's the mother-in-law aspect of it.
Yeah.
There is, let me give a very funny example. When I had my child, my mother-in-law was bent on what they call war, that they have to be dapping the doorbell somehow with lantern and all that. And I argued and argued. The only thing I had to succumb at the end of the day, but I made sure that I monitored what was going on. So you can see the power, and the point is that it starts from generation. Really, it's not easy to remove a norm, to remove a culture, irrespective of even the outcome, the complications we have talked about and all that. They even say that is how it should be. That is how God permitted it. That's how she wrote the history. So it's actually a serious war. It comes to actually educating for our medical personnel that are getting involved. They too may find themselves in that community. Somebody that grew out of the fact that the sisters are circumcised. And there was a study that was carried out that they found out that even medical personnel there in those societies have their daughters did that. So it's difficult to even separate that, so to say. But it's important. The point is that we just keep on how to educate, as you have said, and probably put it in our curriculum from the medical school and then even into the postgraduate level and all that. Then legislation must be firm. As I said, the carrot and stick thing and all that. We just have to keep it going. The noise has to just keep going loud as it can be.
All right. Now, in terms of, back to you, Dr. Lachinji, in terms of educating people, how are you involving community communicators who might have influence, wield that influence on the people to help change their minds?
Thank you. No, we have our structure and the network. This is both social and health intervention. And across local government areas, we have these social mobilizers that are ingrained into the communities. Then we have identified gatekeepers into all the communities. We have people that are influencers that we bring on board. Now, there's a collaboration between us at the local government level. In each of local government, local government is further subdivided into wards. So we have markets, we have traditional leaders, we have religious leaders, we have opinion molders that we have identified. So you first of all bring them on board. So once you convince those ones, it's like a herder and his flock. So once a herder agree to go one direction, the flock will definitely take that path. So when you are able to convince the opinion leader, like I mentioned, there's a community in Oyo State, I think it's in Kajola. We went into the community. Those who were able to identify quickly were the market leaders. Then the market leaders, it took a lot of time before they can be convinced. Through the market leaders, we got across to the traditional leaders. Now they became part of the vanguard, part of the train that will now be able to convince. They are the ones that will now be able to tell you to identify those that are actually doing the practice. They are the ones that will now follow up with them. They are the ones that will know when the woman does deliver. They will follow up with that woman that, okay, you do that, thank God, we give glory to God for his safe delivery, and make sure you don't do this. Even when you are not there, they are the ones doing the campaign. And like, on a lighter note, if Jesus can touch the whole part of the world with 12 disciples, how much more when we are in a small enclave and we have more than 100 disciples to be able to touch every nook and cranny? They can get it done. So what we normally do is to go through these gatekeepers, and they will help us to propagate the gospel that we are getting across to them.
How about religious leaders?
Yeah, I mentioned, I said religious leaders as well, the traditional leaders, and other, they are part of gatekeepers, both be it Muslim, the Christian, and the traditional religious practitioners. They are the one we brought on board, and they are of immense importance and support to
so what has been the most difficult challenge in trying to convince these people to, put this a tradition aside?
The difficult challenge is that what are you bringing to us? That's the way I was circumcised when I was young. That is the way it had been before you were born. That is the way your own mother was circumcised. That is the only thing that has made us. We don't want our children to be wayward. If you don't circumcise them, they will start shifting from one husband to the other. They become so wayward. They'll be reckless with sex, and we don't want them to be that. Some will come and tell you, if you don't circumcise them, we don't want our children to be impoverished in life. We want to stick to this. These are culture that if you don't do it, calamity before these children. So you have to convince them to say, oh, no, it is not true. You now start citing an example. And good enough. In any argument they advance, there are counter-arguments even within our site. For instance, they will tell you that if a child is born, and during the childbirth, the head of that child touches the clit of the woman, that child is not likely to be prosper in life. And the quick answer I always give to them is this. Have you been to Ogun State? Ijebu are a set of group of people that don't circumcise their children, village folks. I will now ask them, do you know the number of Ijebus that are wealthy? They are very, very rich. They say yes. Now, those ones had their birth through the same birth canal. They were not delivered during CS, and they are wealthy. So that shows you that what you are saying is not true. Okay, yeah, if you do this one, some women will be going about from one house to the other. Fine. We will not ask them. I don't want to mention a particular town or tribe now. That do you know people from this area? Say yes. Can I mention 2, 3, or 4 persons to you that have gone to about the 4th or the 5th hour of a husband that they are shifting around? And it is true. Those women were circumcised. How come they are moving from one home to the other? Now look at another society. I can pinpoint 1, 2, 3 persons that since the time they got married more than 30, 40, 50 years ago, they've not even changed their husband, even had any rules with their husband, and yet they are not circumcised. So they will tend to see this, but you give them practical example, they're a little bit convinced. Then other difficult ones are the traditional circumciser themselves. So they see it as a means of livelihood.
Right.
And if you take this one away from us, we will not be able to, and we will now start comparing with them. Is it your own comfort of money you want to make that is important, or the number of women that will die from childbirth? Can't we go for another trade? Can't we do another thing? And can't we go this route? We start telling them they can do another vocation that can take the work away from them. And those are the most difficult group of people that we are dealing with. But gradually, like I said, it's like a matter of carrot and stick. And with conviction and the playing on the emotions and the sentiment of the pain and the danger inherent in the practice, some of them are actually changing, and we are winning the war.
Gradually, we'll get to that very point that we are looking at. Dr. Muhyiddin Olatunji, Oyo State Primary, Executive Secretary of the Oyo State Primary Healthcare Board, thank you so much for your time on the program. And I must thank you, consultant gynecologist and obstetrician, Dr. Mudukbe Adediji, for your time as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.